This is the future. Evolution.
The Crossing Realms Conference launches September 19th and 20th and will dock in Richmond, Missouri. This is already being called the event of the year, folks. With an unprecedented list of speakers and special guests, 2 days of cryptids, UFOs, and paranormal presentations, along with a celebrity-filled ghost hunt, meet and greet, gallery reading, vendors, and a film screening. This promises to be both educational and fun. Go to eventbrite.com to secure your tickets and vendor slots before they are all abducted. They're going fast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Beyond BMR with KRISTA. KRISTA, she's got problems with her internet, so I doubt we'll be seeing the lovely KRISTA from the Blondes and the Booze Paranormal Podcast. So we can catch her back hopefully when she has her show on Thursday with Brandy. So yeah, hopefully she gets that up and running. We have a great guest tonight. Dennis Carroll once again joins the show. Going to be a fascinating show tonight. Thanks to everybody for coming in. If it's your first time, please subscribe to Bigfootmichiganrob on YouTube, the Blondes and the Booze Paranormal Podcast on YouTube, Texas Front Porch, Our Paranormal World, Monica Rollins, Paranormal Paul, Donnie Cho Says Stuff. And Mr. Dennis Carroll also has a cool podcast on YouTube called Hunting the Shadows Podcast. You can see Dennis throughout the week, 2 or 3 times a week. He's got lots of other things going on. Find his books on Amazon. We'll get into a little bit of that toward the end of the show here today. But thank you for coming in. Hit that like button. Please subscribe if you're new. Don't forget the super chat is open. A great way to support what we all do around here. Thank you in advance for that. Also, thank you for those that have bought my books on Amazon. Bigfoot Michigan Rob presents True Cryptid Encounters. Book 1. Book 2. Type Bigfoot Michigan Rob in your Amazon browser. Leave a review. Thank you for that. Leaving a review is very important. It helps with book sales and analytics. You can find us on all podcast platforms, including Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, wherever podcasts are found, you're bound to find us. Turn on your alert bell so you don't miss a single episode here on YouTube. So thank you for that. And, I'm not going to waste any more time here. I'm going to bring up Dr. Dennis here. Making sure he's ready to go. And hey, Dennis, how you doing, my man?
Good evening. How's it going, bud?
Hey, it's going pretty good. Thanks once again for joining us. Or joining me, I guess, tonight. Always look forward to having you on.
I always look forward to being here. We have a great time. We used to have some fantastic conversations, definitely. Yeah. And they go off the rails, but that's okay.
Going off the rails is something that we typically do, but all these subjects that we've talked about a lot of things in the past, like werewolves and dogman. We've talked about Bigfoot, the paranormal. We've even dabbled into the New World Order, artificial intelligence. There's so many things we get to talk about. So I love having you on because we can cover everything. And tonight we're going to do something a little bit different as well, which I can't wait for getting into. And of course, we will go off the rails, and I'm sure we'll go wherever our mind takes us. That's the great thing about these subjects. You can go anywhere because I think they're all related.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. These are some very interesting subjects. And I was telling somebody the other day, it's good shows like these that we can pull some of this stuff out of the shadows. That's why I call my show Hunting the Shadows. Yes. A lot of these things are hiding from us, and we need to get them out there and talk about them and turn them around and turn them over and look at them a little bit and see exactly what it is we're dealing with. And these subjects can be very much like that. And some of them, are very strange in their perception of things and how we see them. The paranormal has always been to me, Rob, sort of like a diamond. You have to hold it up and see its many different facets. And that's what makes it so darn interesting,
There is a lot of facets. And, we were talking the other day about what to do for a topic because we've covered quite a bit. And I'm sure we'll be covering a lot more as the years go by, right? And You asked me about you want to do a show on liminal planes and all of these,
Mhm.
what lurks between time, space, whatever, what the relationship is, and how it affects the things that we do on a daily basis. Yeah, I'm fascinated with this. If you want to kick this show off, what basically for everybody listening, what's your definition, or what is the definition of liminal planes? What's that all about?
Liminal basically means the in between places, the
Hmm.
sort of places that are in between time and space. I've given it other names like the otherwhere, or places like that, the out of time and sequence. Um, I think a lot of times we describe these things, Rob, as being like a doorway, to some of these places. You might say some people might call them dimensions, interdimensional type stuff, and that is true, I think, to a certain extent. But instead of doorways, I kind of look upon them as like openings in a curtain. You kind of just push through the curtain and you walk through, kind of a thing. And there are places all over the world with these what we call liminal places. Liminal, by the way, simply means unlimited or in between limits or in between spaces. And I can think of some very famous liminal places. I mean, that I can call some for you. Like, well, take for instance, Oz. The Land of Oz was written as sort of a liminal place, beyond the rainbow kind of thing. And then you look at Peter Pan. Peter Pan would Never Land.
Yeah,
These are definitely examples of liminal places.
Alice in Wonderland, the
Hmm.
Looking Glass.
But some of these places, Rob, are very, very strange in the way that they do things. And I think a lot of times we mentioned this, I think, before the show one time. I think I'm not going to say all disappearances are connected to this, but I think a lot may be. And I've had a lot of people over the years contact me about, so-called portals or vortexes, whatever name you want to give them. And
Hmm.
they say they've been confronted by these things. And I'm going to tell you a story in a little while here where I confronted one, I think, definitely, and lost time because of it. But I think a lot of disappearances may be this, but I've had a lot of people say they've confronted these things, and I say, well, it's not probably a good idea for you to go through them. If you have a chance to walk into them, you
Okay.
might not come back. That's the bad part.
I often wonder about that. You think there's, really briefly, you mentioned about missing people. Everyone talks about perhaps Bigfoot or Dog Man or what, or humans, right? When it comes to the missing in the woods, I'm a believer that people walk through portals and perhaps they don't come back. It's kind of like the same parameter we're talking about here. Something out in the woods, could be anywhere, really, right? You happen to walk through and boom, you vanish, not to come back. I've heard some stories where people have gone through and come back, and then within several years, they got exposed to something where they end up passing away several years later. I mean, is
Here,
this the kind
here's
of
what
thing we're talking about?
here's the interesting thing about that, Rob. Since you mentioned coming back, sometimes the people that come back are not the ones that went in there. There's been some talk that they're changed when they come back. They're not the same person that went into that portal that came back. And here's something we've got to look at. And I think you hear a lot about reincarnation and all this stuff. I think some of this may be definitely remembrance of different timelines that we're encountering. If the string theory is really true, and there are multiple universes and there are multiple timelines that we're living simultaneously in, you may be getting the echoes of these things, the memories of some of these things that maybe when they cross over. And I think some of this liminal stuff is really crossed timelines. Sometimes maybe
Hmm.
they cross and touch like an intersection, that you go through. But when you do that, you never know what you may encounter.
Hmm. That's interesting. So you suggest that timelines, we can cross timelines. Timelines can be crossed.
I think so. I think they have a junction once in a while, and there may be certain places that this happens at, like these liminal places we're going to talk about tonight. They are all over the world in different areas, And, some very famous ones like, the Bermuda Triangle, the Great Lakes Triangle, the Alaska Triangle. We call them triangles because some of them are shaped that way. But how do we know what their real true boundaries really are? I mean, you can't, they're not measured on a map that well. So when you encounter these places, and here's what I got to say about them. What we do know is one very important fact about these places: anything can happen there. And there's one thing we always got to consider. So when you have to be very careful when you encounter these kinds of areas where people especially have disappeared or weird stuff have happened and they've seen strange lights, they've had strange fogs. There's been a lot of this stuff, a lot of talk here lately about the strange fogs that have happened, mist, electrical occurrences. I had somebody tell me one time that they went from point A to point B down an interstate. And when they got to point B, it should have taken them only like 10 minutes, and it took them 30 minutes to get there. Where did the other 20 minutes go to?
Kind of like some of these things we hear about people that have the lost time when they're out in the woods. And then, of course, they always reflect back on. I've talked to some people that they were in the woods camping, and they're running about the woods. There was a partner and a buddy of his. They're in the woods out camping, and maybe they're out there maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And before you know it, they came across what they thought was some paranormal activity in the woods or whatever it was. I don't recall 100%. But when they looked at their watches, it's almost like they're out in the woods for 6 hours, and they could have swore they were only on the trail for 5 or 10 minutes.
Well, that happened to me, and I'll tell you the story about that. That was very strange. I wasn't even thinking about anything like this. I was out in the woods. I was on a trail I knew very well. Okay, I mean, I could walk this thing blindfolded. I knew it that well, and I knew exactly how long it took me from one point A to point B on this trail. And I remember starting out that day going down the trail, and it was a few bends, but there weren't any trails branching off from it. You know what I'm saying? It was a straight trail kind of, but it had a few bends, but nothing, not like a series of trails. So anyway, I was going down this trail, and the day started off. I noticed something very strange. Everything got very quiet. I mean, there were no birds. Usually you hear birds, you hear squirrels, chirping, moving around. Everything got very quiet. The wind got very still. The day felt very funny there for a minute. I mean, it felt, it's kind of hard to explain how it felt, but it was just sort of like I was somewhere I shouldn't be. In other words, somewhere I'm not going to say out of time and space, but just sort of out of sorts. It just didn't feel right at all. And I began to get a weird, I'm not going to say I got nauseous or sick or anything like that, but I got a kind of a weird feeling in the pit of my stomach, And it wasn't fear or anything like that. It was just sort of like, this just didn't feel right. And as I went further down the trail, and like I said, this trail should have took me about 15 minutes to walk this trail. I remember doing that a lot of times. 15 minutes down, 15 minutes back was 30 minutes. Okay. I always planned that. And I went along and it's always a good idea, folks, to have backup if you go along into the woods, to have somebody know where you're at all times, have a way to communicate with those people. If you need them, you run into any kind of trouble or something. Don't do, it's better not to go alone, really. It's better to have somebody with you. But, lone wolves like me and Rob, we're kind of used to doing that kind of thing. But anyway,
right.
So I was going down this trail, and the further down the trail I got, it just didn't. Even the trail began to not look right. I mean, I began to see trees and stuff. I said, "Have I never seen that before?" It didn't look right. And when I got about halfway down, I stopped. I said, "Okay, this is it." I had a really bad feeling going, if I went further down that trail, maybe I wouldn't come back. And so I said, well, I'm going to turn around and go back because it's taking me longer than I was supposed to. I'd already been walking like 20 minutes on a 15-minute trail. Okay. And I said, this is not right, So I go back. I turn around, I go back. And as I go back, I get about maybe halfway back, sound returns. I start hearing the birds again, and the wind's blowing a little bit. Everything is back to normal. And I look at my watch, and on that 15-minute trail, I've been there like about 40 minutes.
Jeez.
So I can, to this day, cannot tell you where the rest of that time went to, because I didn't dawdle around. I didn't stop, sit down, and I was walking all this time.
Yeah, and you were cognizant of your surroundings.
I'm 6'4". When I walk, I cover a pretty good distance when I'm walking kind of briskly, which is what I was doing.
Yeah, you could be like bipedal footfall. Maybe you imitate a Sasquatch. 6'4". Yeah, you got some footfall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you didn't lose cognizance. I mean, you knew where you were. You didn't doze off. You were just simply going about your business, knowing that you have is 15 minutes there, 15 back, and now you're spending 40 minutes. Yeah. And you just don't know how.
And that was the weird part, but it was the feeling. I'm not gonna say it was like it was an electrical charge in the air, but there wasn't. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I wasn't picking up on that. I mean, I didn't see lightning bolts or anything like that. I mean,
yeah.
But I felt a very strange thing in the air about it, and that was the weird feeling. And I think that threw my whole equilibrium off, kind of. You know what I mean? It just threw my whole system off, and that's what I was feeling. And I'm one of those very sensitive people. I pick up on these things very quickly. And I've been that way my whole life. And I was feeling that day. That was very funky feeling, definitely, because, it was just that feeling. I've had a lot of people say, well, can you explain what it felt like? I can't really, because it was just like, nothing I'd ever felt before in that respect,
I got one for you. It's going to kind of bake your noodle a little bit. I took a word from Bake Your Noodle from The Matrix. I remember they said that movie. It was I forget who it was. But I got to tell you, I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier and a little bit before the show. Again, this one person. Now, how can you account for this? Now, this is something different. I'm not going to suggest anything with this, but the man I told you earlier about a guy that knew about his whereabouts in the forest well over 20 years, hiked, fished, camped. In fact, his dad taught him. His dad used to bring him to the same location. So this man knows this is just like his own home. And there's a river, and he's familiar with the forest, and he's hiking down the river and doing his thing, looking to one of his favorite fishing holes. The Dennis, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he doesn't know where he's at. In fact, the river, it kind of dissipated, and now he's like lost. And even the landscape, the trees, the sounds of the animals, just the entire environment was different. And this guy really got scared. He's lost. In his mind of mine, he's lost. And this goes on. He's wandering on 5 or 10 minutes, and he has to sit down and take a break, Dennis. And he sits down on a log, a dead stump, whatever it was, to just kind of get his composure, try to map out what he did wrong, if anything, which according to him, no. I mean, same area, same location. Mm-hmm. And then he got this eerie feeling, but not one that was nefarious, but just this odd feeling overtook him. And he looks through the tree line, and these weird trees that were unfamiliar from the past, he would see almost like faces manifest in these trees, which is very spooky. And he had this, pull one of these numbers, rub his eyes. Am I seeing things now? Not only am I lost, am I seeing things? He's seeing these faces, but something told him, he was telling me, to follow, because when he started looking down the wood line, all of these trees, these different types of faces would appear, and something told him to follow, Dennis, and he followed. He's in this about 8, 9, 10 minutes. Then all of a sudden, the wood line, it kind of came back to his reality, what he remembers, and all of a sudden he hears the trickling of the stream, the river in the background. Gets around this bend. All of a sudden, the river, the stream is there. Now he finally realizes he's back in his location that he's been going to for 20 years, and I let him right back to his campsite. Now, this probably has nothing to do with the Liminal Planes, which I'm sure we'll get on a little bit further, but what do you think was what do you think this guy happened? I mean, are Liminal Planes, was that a time rip? Did he walk through a portal in your estimation? What do you think happened with this guy? Because I really gave him the best answer I could. I suggested it was a portal that he walked through, and he's lucky enough to find his way back. But then again, the elementals of the forest, it seemed to me like those were elementals of the forest already that helped bring him back out of where he was. Kind of a lot to unwrap there, but what's your thoughts?
Absolutely. Rob, I think there's a lot of clues in folklore that point to some of these things like this. We hear about the fairy rings, that people talk about, the Sealy courts, and the secret places they supposedly meet. And if you intrude in on these places, if you spend one day with the fairies, 100 years will pass in real time. So that sounds to me like that's very dimensional, no matter which way you look at it. And you hear about a lot of these different stories and about time as related to these things. And what I find so interesting about some of this is that, some people who have encountered these and actually come back to tell us about them, say that sounds very interdimensional. It's kind of very much like, I don't know if you're familiar with the movie Constantine.
Mm-hmm.
But in Constantine, hell is described as being just one step away. It's here with us, but it's one step away from where we're at interdimensionally, and these things may be very much closer to us than we truly realize. They're just that one step, that goes into that. And when you encounter these liminal places, I think there is where the veil is very thin, or very thin to the point where, like I said, you can part that curtain and walk through almost. And I think that's why people see things in these places. They see paranormal and have paranormal activity. They see even UFOs and all that. I was mentioned earlier about Hoya Bashu. Hoya Bashu is an area in the Romanian forest where a lot of weird stuff have happened. I think Josh Gates went there with a show that he did. I think Expedition Unknown or something. It's a very fascinating place. UFOs have been seen there. A lot of paranormal activity is recorded. Portal type activity. The list goes on and on. And there are other places like Hoya Bashu. There's one not too far from where I'm at in North Carolina called the Devil's Tramping Ground. It is a complete circle out in the forest where nothing grows. And here's the interesting thing. They say that if you try to spend the night in that circle, you will wake up the next morning outside of that circle, no matter even if you put your tent in there. And they say the same thing happens in Hoya Bashu that I was mentioning. That there was, I think, one incident where they had sort of, they tried to do, which was kind of stupid, but they tried to do a seance in the middle of this clearing, okay? And they all got thrown out of this clearing. I mean, physically thrown out of the clearing. And they could never see what it was, but some kind of force exited them from this area. That's weird. And another incident that you got to think about with these things, and I mentioned timelines earlier. Also, a lot of these places line up with ley lines that we hear so much about. And I think, like you mentioned, elementals are also supposedly seen in some of these areas. So there is a definite elemental connection thing going on here, and an earth energy type thing also connected with these liminal places.
We talk about it all the time. All these things are definitely connected some way or another, are they not? I mean, to me, it doesn't matter what subject you're talking when we're talking about these liminal places, portals, talking about the paranormal, the cryptid world. There's a key ingredient to all this, I think. What is it? Is a mystery, right?
Yeah, and like I said, there's other factors that you got to, you got to play in with it too. And also, I was just thinking while you're saying that, when I encountered the Bigfoot that I encountered, I told you about the story. I was close enough that I could as we say in the South, I could have hit him with a rock real easy. I could have reached out and grabbed him if I wanted to. Okay. I wouldn't advise that though. But I could have done that. That's how close I was to him. And he walked around the side of that big tree and he was just gone. And there is no way that I can explain that, because he didn't go up the tree, didn't go down in the hole, unless he became part of that tree or stepped through a portal. It had to be one of those things. He had to, part that curtain and walk through somehow, because there was no way, I'm going to say humanly possible. There's no way at all possible, whether human or not, that he could have gotten out of my way, my sight that quick. Could have got away from me. There's no way. Because I have tracked a lot of animals in my time. I've run into bears, I've run into mountain lions, wolves, all of them. None ever acted like that. I've never had one do that. But he was there, and he was so big. I mean, he was, like I said, I'm 6'4". He was at least well over 8 foot tall. Because I went back later on and I measured a branch from where his head was at that was in that tree, and it was slightly over 8 foot. And that's something that big to disappear that quick. That's wild.
That is wild. I mean, do you think that when we're talking about these time, space, liminal planes, are there other worlds that we don't know about that are in between these? I don't even know how you'd explain that. I guess what we have to get to is like in these planes. I mean, what's in between these planes? Is this just something from the past, the future? I mean,
well, if there are timelines,
okay,
and they are intersecting, like we mentioned earlier, that could be also part of it. But what are these liminal places? Like we said, they're in between. They may be the transitioning area between one dimension and another. Okay. I have actually seen spiritual type entities transition from the spiritual energy type thing into the physical realm. Okay. I've seen this, and I know that's the way these things operate. So they are transitioning, and I'm not going to say they're going through a portal, but they are definitely stepping through that curtain I talked about, and they are transitioning from one reality to another. So the in-between place, okay, that they're doing that would be a liminal place. And it would be wouldn't it not be sort of another dimension of its own? You know what I'm saying? Okay. It's just like, and here's the way you can look at it. Like if you got a table up against the wall in a room, and the space in between that table and the wall would be your liminal space. Okay. But that's still the table and the wall there. See what I'm saying? And the liminal space would be in between that. So is that really a dimension or just another space? Or is it just an empty place, But if you look at the table and the wall, there's not a whole lot of room there between them, but you still got a liminal space. And that's what this thing is. This is like that transitioning area between realities, between dimensions, maybe between timelines, or whatever the situation. If you go into that area, you could easily become lost and not know your way back. If you stop in your transitioning, what happens to you? Will you fall out of time and space? You may disappear. You could probably go into that weird place we always call oblivion. A place where there's nothing, that's it. You could be gone that quick. And maybe that's what happens to a lot of these weird disappearances you hear. How about that man? I remember that very famous case of that man in Kentucky whose family was standing on the porch watching him walk across a field, and he disappeared out in the middle of that field, never to be seen again. But for days they could hear him calling them from somewhere.
Oh, wow. They could hear him calling out to them.
They could hear him, and they would holler back at him, but then he couldn't hear them evidently.
Almost like you're on the other side of a wall, like you say. I mean, maybe that liminal place, right? That's where he's trapped. I'm wondering though, from that side, you could probably see to our side, right? I'm just imagining. I don't know. I mean,
but and if you're thinking about this, Rob, think about this. This is mind blowing when you think about it. this space in between dimensions, what is that?
Yeah,
what is
right.
that liminal place? And if you ever went there and stopped in there or went to it or walked through it, would you ever come back? Because you are in between dimensions. You're somewhere else altogether. Do you still exist in the known universe? That's the question.
That is a great question. Would you still exist in the universe? Because you're not in the universe, you're in a different plane or place.
Or another existence. And there have been several reports that I have seen of here's the interesting side effect of this. Some people that have encountered portals have come back with cancer, heart disease, things that they didn't have before they went in these portals. Is there some kind of a price you pay for that physically by transitioning through these things? I think there is a very good possibility of that because you are transitioning realities. You are moving through different spheres or different dimensions of being. It could screw around with you physically. Yeah, definitely.
I've heard similar reports to what you're just talking about. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get into that tonight, but I've heard that people that are no longer with us that have allegedly gone through these things and come back, and then they got very sick with with cancer or whatever else they came up with. So you're suggesting maybe when we're talking about these cryptid creatures and anything else, then maybe sometimes, I mean, we're all talking about Bigfoot in the forest. I think that the dogman is more of a dimensional being myself. Certainly, we've heard of the canine upright cryptid. I get that. Do you think a lot of these things maybe are just sitting there on the outside looking in on the other side of these planes?
And would this not be with this in between place, this liminal place that is really nowhere? Okay.
Yeah,
if you want to look at it that way, it's really nowhere. But yet we're talking about somewhere that's really nowhere. What if there are beings that live and exist in this place? Creatures that maybe come through once in a while into our reality. That's another transitioning thing we've got to think about. And, since you mentioned that, I have known a lot of people in paranormal fields, cryptid and otherwise, who have encountered paranormal activity and had some bad physical effects from that. I myself once encountered the men in black, and a couple of weeks later, I almost died. I ended up in the hospital. To this day, they don't know what happened to me. I always kind of tied that into that experience because I was fine and dandy until that happened. I mean, it just came out of nowhere. And I've heard a lot of reports of this. Whenever you touch or get close to the paranormal in whatever form it may take, cryptid or otherwise, whatever the situation, I think you pay a price in some ways for it. If you're not careful, some people I think are exposed or more sensitive than others to it. You know what I'm saying? But if that does occur, you're still gonna, be affected in some way or another. And we've had a lot of reports of people coming back from these experiences that are not the same. I had a woman contact me not long ago. Listen to this. This is mind blowing. She contacted me not long ago. Said her husband was a government contractor. She said, the man I've been married to for 15 years is not the man I'm living with right now. Said he came back, from a business trip like a couple of months ago, and it's not the same man. It's not the same person. And she said, who is this? She was scared. I mean, she was very upset about this. Said even they had two little kids. They even knew there was something wrong about their dad. He wasn't right. He was not the same man. And she to cap it all off, and I was very concerned about her. I said, well, look, you got to watch. You can't say anything, but you got to watch him very, very closely, and can't accumulate enough evidence to understand what's going on here and, get back to me. Unfortunately, I never heard back from her again. I don't know what happened to her. But here's the clincher to this, Rob. She said the man that I've lived with for 12 years until just a couple of months ago was left-handed. Now he's right-handed.
Oh, man. There's something going on in Denmark.
And guess what his research was? When I found out, I asked her, his research was with portals and interdimensional stuff.
Maybe it's possible that he did slip into a portal and was one of these people that made it back through back through the side, right? And maybe it altered his. Hell, maybe it wasn't even him, right? As you're suggesting, maybe it was.
Yeah, it's very true. You know, that's very. I've used this as an example a lot of times. You know, time is like a river. Okay.
Yeah.
If you go down to the river tomorrow, Rob, and stick your foot in the river, and you come back and do the same exact thing the next day in the same place, you're not the same person that stuck your foot in there the day before. You have changed. Time has moved on. You're not the same person. Okay.
Yeah.
What if you even did that on a bigger scale and you went through a portal and you came back not the same person? What if you switched places with the person in another timeline? Okay, put it that way. That's another possibility. You could be switching out. We call it walkthroughs. Okay, what if a lot of this shadow person activity? I think, and you know, some of it's very downright demonic. I won't get into that tonight, but there's some other aspects of it that seem very interdimensional. As a matter of fact, these beings seem interdimensional, very flat dimensioned. Could these be walkthroughs of some sort from some other type of dimension? You know, that's a very real possibility too. So if these timelines cross, and I have actually seen this, I believe I've seen evidence of this. I have seen places. Let me give you a quick example. I know this is going to sound freaky, but there used to be a McDonald's in the neighborhood. I would go by and get coffee in the morning. Okay. I always liked McDonald's coffee. I would get coffee in the morning. I'd drive through. One day, and this McDonald's had not been there for a long time, okay? Because I've been going there ever since it's been built. It wasn't that, you know, big of a deal. But one day I noticed there's a big junction box sitting outside there, you know, electrical junction box. I said, God, I never noticed that before because I sit right here in the drive-through, I could see it, you know. I said, how come I never, you know, noticed that before? And it didn't look brand new, you know. It looked like it had been there a while. So I asked the manager, I said, when did you get a new junction box put in back there? He said, no, it's been here ever since we built the place. But I said, well, it was not there because I would remember seeing that. It was so very obvious right next to the speaker there, you know. Where did that come from? Because, you know, I'm very observant. I was trained in law enforcement to observe everything, okay?
Yeah.
I can pass you on the street and tell exactly what kind of clothes you're wearing, if you got a mustache or what. Whatever the situation is, that's just the way I'm made, okay?
Yes.
I would have known that thing was there. Where did it come from?
Right. That's fascinating.
Yeah, there's a lot of freaky stuff like that goes on with this kind of, and that's why. And here's another thing we got to look at with liminal places: do they move? Maybe they move around. Maybe they go from place to place, and we don't know that, which may explain other weird phenomena and disappearances as well. Maybe these places move across the earth without us knowing it, and we encounter them once in a while.
So these liminal planes, and they're not. I mean, what if there's a liminal plane, let's say in northern Michigan, there could be a liminal plane in South Florida. They're the same but different. Or is that a whole different plane? And could that perhaps be a whole different world? Maybe some whole different creatures or beings or whatever we want to dream up here, right? It still would be different. It wouldn't be a universal plane.
And supposedly, Rob, here's another thing we can look at too. This is freaky as all get out too. Okay, when you think about it, look at mirrors. Okay,
yeah,
mirrors are thought to be well-known portals. Remember Alice Through the Looking Glass? Okay, I have seen film where people have actually filmed images through mirrors. I know there's one famous one that looks like a warehouse somewhere, like a huge warehouse. I think it's the one from Indiana Jones or something. But anyway, it's like a huge warehouse. You've seen that? Have you seen that one?
Yeah.
You can see it through a mirror, you know. And actually, but here's the interesting thing: it has been thought for 1,000 years that mirrors can be doorways to some of these portals or these liminal places. Yeah, that's another one.
I've seen that in the movies. I've read about it. I've heard other people talk about it. They even suggest that a mirror, if you use incorrectly, can serve as almost the same as a Ouija board, or worse in some instances.
Oh yeah, you have a lot of scrying attached with black mirrors and black water scrying, as they used to call it. They would put dyes in the water and have black water that they would look into, supposedly see images and all that. And a lot of this is reported on monitors and TV sets when they're cut off and there's a black screen. There's been a lot of stuff reported being seen. They've seen faces and actual figures, in these shadows like of people in these screens. That's kind of like scrying, to a certain extent in that way. And here's another thing: if mirrors can be portals, so then too could paintings and other images that are put on canvas be the same thing as well. Yeah.
Speaking about these mirrors, there's this place in Traverse City. It's called Mission Point. I was there many years ago with a group of people, and it allegedly was haunted. And the backstory behind this Mission Point, which they converted into a pretty nice restaurant, was that the man that owned the property several decades ago had offed his wife. And the rumor has it, and a lot of the employees were telling us that these employees, a lot of them that were working there, so they come across these weird things in this restaurant, especially those that have worked there for like 10, 15 years. Always something weird's happening. And they say that there's a powder room on the upstairs floor where allegedly this man's wife was found. He at his own hands, as he's the one that did her in. That oftentimes older women would, if they were to go in there and look into the mirror, oftentimes they could see the image of this woman in the background of the mirror. Can you imagine?
Oh, yeah. There's been a lot of reports of so-called ghost spirits being seen through mirrors, and also, the old superstition that when someone died in the house, they would cover the mirrors because they were afraid their souls would get trapped in the mirrors. That's another interesting aspect. And here's another thing: you could hold up something like a piece of paper to a mirror, flat up against the mirror, and you can still see the other side of that thing, but you can't see it with your eyes. You can only see it through the mirror. Is that not a liminal place in a way? That's an illustration of it too. Try it sometimes. Real freaky experiment, but it does work. You can actually see that image in the mirror, but you can't see it with your eyes. But it may be perpendicular to how flat you're looking at it. I don't know. There may be an explanation for it, but it's really weird. It's really freaky how it works out that way. But there is something about mirrors that, even ancient peoples talked about, especially back many years ago before the invention of mirrors. There was a pan of water. It was the only way you could see yourself, the reflection of yourself. But it's almost as if the mirror has its own kind of energy, its own kind of sphere of influence over things. I know one of the worst demonic cases I ever had concerned a man who unalived himself between two mirrors during a satanic ceremony. That was one of the worst cases I ever ran into. And there was something about this that the fact is that they really should have destroyed the mirrors, but they didn't. And wherever these mirrors went, there was a lot of very bad paranormal stuff happened around them. It was a really freaky case. And eventually I ended up telling them, please, to destroy the mirrors, paint over them or whatever they wanted. If they didn't want to break them, paint over them or something and put them in storage or get rid of them, whatever the situation was, they get them out of the house.
Yeah. Because
there was something attached to these mirrors. So if certain things can attach to mirrors like that, what else could, makes you wonder. Because if there are certain things existing in these liminal places when you open doorways, whether it be naturally or intentionally, you run the risk of letting these things in our world. And, Rob, I believe without a doubt that a lot of cryptids that people are seeing may be coming from just that kind of a situation. Because there's a lot of things being seen in this world that absolutely do not really belong here.
No, there's not. I mean, we're talking about more than just Bigfoot and Dogman, too, right, Dennis? I'm sure there are things that have come through these planes that we might not have even seen yet, right? They're in the dark, they're in the shadows, or just watching us. You think there's any plausibility to that? There's much more out there than what meets the eye?
Well, there was one report, and we're talking about cryptids, and I'm not talking about Dogman and Bigfoot because they may belong here. I don't know, But here, I think a lot of times some of these dogmen are conjured, but I won't get into that tonight. But anyway, here's the thing about it: if they are opening doorways to some of these things and letting them through, who knows what they may be. But I've heard about Cryptid X, okay? And this sounds like something that would have come from some other dimension. But what this is like a black cloud or fog like. And it's not real big. It's probably, say 4 by 5 foot or something like that. And this thing floats around. And it has been seen on certain Indian reservations in this country. It has attacked people. I think one time it even sort of went over an air conditioning unit and blew it out. And it's almost like this is a cloud of electrical charge. Only thing I can say energy like. And this thing floats around, but it has actually attacked people, making them participating them into having a heart attack a couple of times. What is this? And what it isn't. This is something when you see something like a black mass floating through the air and appearing outside people's windows, and appearing in their houses and doing these things. Knocking out air conditioning units. They've seen this thing actually look like it recharges on electrical lines. Okay. When you see something like that, that just does not sound like something from the nature of Earth, the planet Earth, to me.
No, it doesn't. Hold that thought, Dennis, because my mom is here. I have to do something for her really quick. So take me 30 seconds. In the meantime, why don't you tell everybody where we can find you and where we can find your books? I'll be back in 30 seconds. Okay, I'll be right there. All right?
Okay. All right. Well, yes, my books. If anybody's interested in purchasing any of my books, I have several books on Amazon, and which are also on Barnes and Noble. All you need to do is look up the author. That's Dennis W. Carroll, and you will find the books. And also, I have a website, denniswcarroll.com, and I am also a paranormal consultant. If any of you out there have any kind of paranormal problems, demological or otherwise, whatever the situation, you got something worrying you, something bothering you, you just want some questions or something, you can contact me free of charge. Doesn't cost anything. You can contact me at denniswcarroll.com. And we'll try to find the answers together. If I don't know the answers, we'll look for them together, okay? Definitely. But if you need any kind of consultation or help with any kind of situation or problems, or you just want to tell your story, that's fine too. You might be in my next book, okay? That's great too. I love to hear the stories. I love to hear reports, firsthand accounts of what have happened to people. So please don't hesitate to contact me at denniswcarroll.com.
Yeah, and Dennis does have a great podcast, of course, on YouTube. We probably talked about it in a brief moment I was gone there. Thank you for that. Fascinating. You always have great topics, great conversation. You have a couple of different shows out there. And how many books have you written out, Dennis?
Well, so far, I think about 4 or 5 books. I've got one I'm working on right now. This one I'm excited about. I call it Paracryptidology. That's where we combine the fields of paranormal and cryptozoology together. We're meshed now forever, okay?
Yeah, there's something about cooking and cryptids. Well, it always comes up almost every show. But yeah, that'll be fascinating. That'll be cool. I'll go check that one out when it's ready. You know, I got something I got to ask you. You might have heard this, but I can't believe I've never told you this because I just don't have any answers for this. Now, a couple of my other friends, we've discussed it many times. The thing that intrigued me, and I only bring this up because it kind of resonates a little with me, because I used to have these, I haven't had them in a long time, knock on wood, these dreams, almost like sleep paralysis. In fact, I think it might have been on certain occasions.
Mm-hmm.
I was sitting in the middle of a room. I was watching some spooky show. I mean, it was a documentary. And Dennis, I'm looking down my hallway, and there's this fog, this mist, it's rolling down my hallway, and I'm like, and I got really scared because I thought maybe it was smoke, but there was no scent to it. But back down the hall, if you turn the corner, there's a utility room where my furnace is at. So I'm thinking that maybe something was going on with that. And I get up and I'm going toward this mist. And as I'm walking toward the mist, Dennis, it dissipates. It vanished like it wasn't even there, almost like vapor or steam, right? I check on my furnace. Furnace is running fine. There's no smells. Everything's good. And then I go back. I sit back down. I continue on. And then all of a sudden, this started happening again. Now, I'm thinking this happened like 20 minutes later. I'm thinking I'm asleep, Dennis, but I don't know. I think I'm fully awake because I'm staring at the TV. And this fog again starts rolling down the hallway. And now, Dennis, I'm looking. I'm now wanting to get up again like I did the last time. But now I can't move. I'm paralyzed, which is why I'm thinking I had sleep paralysis. I had bouts of sleep paralysis before where you can't yell out, you can't move, but you know you're fully awake. And now this mist starts circling around the chair. And I don't know where or what is happening to me, what I'm experiencing. Am I awake? Am I sleeping? Is it paralysis? But I'm fully watching the TV. I know that I'm up. And it seemed like it lasted until the daylight. It really did. It seemed like it lasted forever. In fact, it only lasted about maybe 3 or 4 minutes. But in my mind, it took forever. Then it just kind of went away. It was suggested to me that sometimes we can attract some of these things. We're talking about mirrors. We're talking about intent. We're talking about sometimes, how we get involved with a lot of this paranormal stuff that it consumes us sometimes. And I'm just wondering if I brought that upon myself from just having that day of watching that creepy documentary and just all the things that we do on a daily basis. You think that catches up to people where they inadvertently can maybe open up something? In the instance of what happened to me, I can't explain it. Hasn't happened. It happened one other time. This is a few years ago, but nothing since. So I've done some things. I did a cleansing of the house, as was told to me by one of my friends, and haven't had that. But it kind of scared me a little bit. I just got over. I can't sleep a lot at night, anyways. And a lot of times, I'm sometimes scared to go to sleep because of these wild dreams that I have. Any thoughts on that?
Well, that definitely sounds like a spiritual attack.
Mm-hmm.
And it has sort of vampiric-like qualities with it. This is one way that supposed vampire spirits can attack. They can also drain you. They can also paralyze you while they're doing it, supposedly. It is a definite, what you describe as a definite spiritual attack. And it's a good thing you did have the area cleansed. And do that on a regular basis, really. I do that with my house on a regular basis. I mean, I make it almost like a monthly thing that I will cleanse it spiritually, because there are a lot of bad actors out there, a lot of bad things out there that will come against you in this respect. And I think there's more so now in the world than there has ever been before. We need to understand that not only is our personal safety our responsibility, wherever we may be, whether it's in a parking lot or at home, you don't sit around with your doors open. You don't sit around with your, windows wide open for everybody to see what you're doing out there. We don't do that physically, we don't need to let that happen spiritually as well. We need to be spiritually on guard against some of this stuff too, because what you sound out there, that was definitely a spiritual attack, almost like a vampire, the way a vampire spirit attacks. And they will come back sometimes, 2 or 3 nights in a row sometimes. And I don't know if you had an energy problem after that happened. You may have felt drained after that or whatever, but it will take a toll on you physically as well. I've had a lot of people come to me and they would have these attacks, or they run into a paranormal field of some sort, whatever situation. I don't know, a lot of people don't realize this. I say, after this happens, you need to go, like, you need to eat you a piece of chocolate or something, because this will drop your blood sugar fast. These kind of things will do. It's almost like an energy charge, a negative energy charge. It's just taking the energy out of you. That's what these things do. And that's what so-called energy vampires can do. And guess what? They can appear against you, just like what you're talking here with sort of the cloud, sort of the fog-looking thing. It can be sort of like an out-of-body thing with them. They can travel this way, and they're incorporeal type bodies. They can also supposedly appear in your dreams this way. They can attack you in your dream state as well. That's another thing you got to look at too.
Yeah, it hasn't happened in a while. I did a few things as suggested, and I just thought that I think a lot of people can manifest things, right? And I think, and it could be anything, not even the paranormal or cryptid world. You could be consumed as a business person or a gardener or whatever. And I think the more time you put into things and the more things you invest and really take that deep dive, I think, like we're talking really earlier about these portals, these opening up these dimensions. I think that, do you think that we can open up these things personally?
Oh, absolutely. There are ways in which dark witchcraft, sorcery, that can open rituals that can supposedly open these doors. Matter of fact, I've had to go into a couple of cemeteries in my time where there had been some dark magic performed in there and try to close some of these portals that they foolishly leave open. I remember there was one cemetery that was very close to an apartment complex, and everybody in that apartment complex was having some kind of paranormal problem. And I couldn't figure out, I said, maybe it was one apartment, one, two, but everybody, and finally I found out that, over in behind this apartment complex was an old cemetery. And I went out in the cemetery and I found candles and stuff out there. They were doing something out there. Okay. So they opened the doorway. And as soon as I closed the doorways spiritually in that cemetery, went back and cleansed that apartment complex, they never ever had a problem again after that. So that was where the problem was coming from. And it was very demonological, by the way. There was a lot of there was even one instance in this apartment complex where demons appeared as little children in front of somebody. So it was very bad stuff, whatever doorway it opened. So yes, these doorways, these places can be opened. And it's not a good idea to do that, but people foolishly do things they shouldn't do. But they open these places with seances. They open them with rituals. They open them with Ouija boards. The list goes on and on and on. You can do this with a piece of paper and a pencil. You don't have to have anything special there. But they open these doors, Rob, and never know what's on the other side waiting to come in. And I had a lot of people come, I've used Ouija boards for years and years. Nothing ever happened to me. Well, I said, you've been incredibly lucky. Somebody's watching out for you, because it's like playing roulette with a loaded gun. Sooner or later, you're going to get on a chamber with a bullet in it. Okay. If you're not careful, something bad's going to happen here. And you got to understand, when you do these rituals, you open these doorways or windows or whatever you want to call them. If you part that curtain, there could be anything on the other side waiting to come through. And here's the bad part. Once that curtain is open, you don't have a whole lot of control of what's going to happen.
I agree. Yeah, I would have to think that's true. I've heard so many things. We hear about these people that are dealing with the Ouija boards or whatever it is. You don't know what you're doing, and you can open something up. And if you don't know how to close it, you got something forever. attached to you. Just like I was hearing too, maybe you can. I heard this story about some person was telling me some time ago that they don't even. It's a bad idea to have a welcome mat at your back door or your front door, whether it's outside or inside the home, because you're inviting something in. Now, something that's simple, Dennis, I don't know, but the more we get involved with this, the more people we talk to, nothing to me surprises me. Just like I thought that the Ouija board was, it's you can buy it at Walmart on a shelf. It's a game made by, Milton Bradley or whoever. Come on, really? That can affect us. That can bring something nefarious into our homes or into our lives. For the longest time, Dennis, I said, yeah, that can't be true. But as you know, the longer you experience and talk to folks and investigate these things, I think just about anything is possible. Something as simple as having a welcome mat placed outside your home.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Invitations can be many different ways. You can invite things many different ways. You can open doors in your life to certain things. You can do that with drugs. You can do it with alcohol. You can do it with obsession. You can do it with lust. The list goes on and on and on. They're waiting for you to open these doors. And that's why I warn people against astral projection and traveling, playing with Ouija boards, doing seances, playing with portals and all this other stuff. You are playing with something, just like I said earlier, Russian roulette or kissing a rattlesnake. It's not going to come out good in the end. Something bad's going to happen sooner or later. I hope it doesn't, but that's the risk you're running. Okay. And it's a very viable risk there that you're playing with. You think you may, let me say, I ask people this: when you contact the other side, just who do you think you're talking to? You don't really know. And another thing is, when you open these doorways, you have no control. You don't have a whole lot of control over them. Okay. And if something wants to push its way through, once you crack that door open, you may not be able to stop it. That's the bad thing. And once it gets in your life, once it opens the doorway to your lifestyle, your life ability, and everything about you, it will then begin to do one thing and one thing only. What these negative forces intend to do is destroy you. Period. That's it. It's all about your destruction. I saw a thing today. There was a woman smelling something in the can and said, "Oh, it's self-destruction. Doesn't it smell so good?" And that's what these things work on. They tag into your self-destructive capabilities and get you to destroy your own self. But that's the way they work. We must be very careful when dealing with any kind of things. And when you go into these liminal places we're talking about and other situations, you need to be on guard. Don't do it foolishly. There's a correct way and a wrong way to do everything. And you got to be very careful how you approach these things, because I don't want to see you get in trouble. I've seen it happen too many times, okay? And I don't want to see anybody get in that situation, because it's a horrible place to be. And here's the bad part, folks. If you ever get into these things bad, there's not a whole lot of help out there for you. You think you can go to the church and it's going to help you, but it will take them years to decide whether or not you're able to help you. And, I've seen this would happen to a lot of people and say, "Hey, I need help and I need it right now." And you definitely do. You want help right now. You don't want it several years down the line here. You want real viable help. And there's not a whole lot of it out there for you. Trust me. People come to me every day with these things. And, I have to tell them a lot of times, well, you got to seek help wherever you can find it.
And as you said, that's very hard to find help, especially in subjects that we're talking about, right? You got to know where to look.
And here's the thing about it, Rob. If you go through one of these doors into one of these liminal places, there's not a team sitting out there waiting to come after you. There's not a SWAT team that's going to come after you. There's not a team. There should be some, but there's not. Just like, some of these other situations you may get yourself into. We think, we're going to, here's what I used to ask people in my lectures. I used to do a lot of lectures on this. I say, here, let me ask you one very important question. If somebody breaks into your house tonight, what's the first thing you're going to do? Women mostly raise their hand. I'll call the police. I say, well, good luck, because you'll be dead. Well, yeah, that's not your first line of defense, folks. No. As much as they want to get there to help you, and I've been in them situations. We had to go across town many times at over 100 miles an hour getting somewhere, okay, to help somebody, but we can't possibly humanly be there when you pick the phone up.
Yeah, if someone's in your
line of defense.
Yeah, no, you can't call someone's in your home. You're not. Last thing you're doing is calling the police. Now you might try it, but you're going to be looking for something to escape out a back door of your home or defend yourself. One of the two, right?
Exactly right.
I mean, that's the first thing that would come pop in my head. Phone in hand, find a weapon, or just sneak out the back door and call the police from outside.
You have to do. A lot of people's had to do that over the time, but we've got to understand that we've got to take personal responsibility for things that we do.
Yes, we do.
How we do things. But yes, there is. If you have faith in God, definitely that is one thing. It's like that scene. One of my favorite scenes from that vampire movie. With the guy holding the cross up. The vampire laughs at him and says, "You got to have faith to use that."
Yes.
Work without it. And if you have that can be a good bumper too. But here's the thing about it. It's just like, we're careful about where we go nowadays. You have to be, crime eventually will find you no matter where you go. I saw that as a police officer many times. And that's a bad thing when it happens, because you work hard all your life to, you break your back to buy the things you want to give, the things you want to own and possess, and then some flunky that doesn't want to work comes in and steals what you got. That's never a good thing. Of course not. But that's the way evil works. Evil has no feelings for you. It has no empathy for you at all. And you got to understand that. That's what you're dealing with. It's just like swimming with sharks. Eventually sharks, sooner or later, they're going to do what sharks do.
They're going to eat you.
Yeah.
They're going to eat you and make baby sharks.
Yeah.
You brought up a good point, though. I suppose, though, in dealing with some of these topics, if you're a strong-minded person, you believe in God, you have faith, you're probably more protected, although you're not going to be dismissed from it if you aren't responsible with how you go about researching these things. Is that probably fair to say?
Absolutely. It's like that old saying, God helps those that help themselves. He wants you to have, common sense and not put yourself in some of these situations to begin with.
Well,
that's the one thing. An ounce of prevention is worth a whole lot of pounds of cure, definitely. And he wants you to have, I think, but he wants you to have common sense. But we do tend to get into situations sometimes. He understands that, I think, too. And when we do, he is an ever-present help, especially angelic help. That'd make a great show sometime. Think about it. Angels are a fascinating subject. But I think without a doubt, there's help there, but we've got to have enough faith. We've got to understand what activates that and be ready to use it when we need to. But that's where faith comes in. Faith is hope in things that you can't see. Faith is in belief in something that you may not materialistically hold in your hand, but you still believe in it. That's why that cross, I've had a lot of people say, "Oh, that cross is not going to, it's just a piece of wood." But it's what it symbolizes, what it stands for, and what it connects up with you in your mind to is what makes it so powerful. That's faith. That's an act of faith. You get up in the morning, when you wake up and get out of bed and put your shoes on and stand up, that's an act of faith. You think you're going to make it to the kitchen, okay, for that cup of coffee or whatever. That's an act of faith on your part that you hope you can make it to the kitchen. Well, that's what we have to do. That's where faith comes in. It has to be alive. It has to be a living faith. It has to be acted upon. Faith without works is dead. You don't want dead faith. You might end up being dead with it.
Yeah. With these, when we're talking about these planes, again, you think, I was just trying to think in my head, how they even materialized on the planet, right? Were they put here long before time? Something that evolved? Or is it just something that we brought upon ourselves, right? They always talk about the thinning of the veil and all of this and that. Is that something that maybe we conjured up, these other planes, or have they been there for decades, centuries, Dennis?
I think we're messing around with some things that we shouldn't be messing around with. Okay, we're playing God, the Frankenstein syndrome thing we talked about before. I think that's part of it. I think that's in part of the equation. But also, I think that what we're talking about, these liminal places, are part of the universe itself. But maybe it's the part we're not supposed to mess around with. That's something we got to look at too. And if we are manipulating things, whether it's intentional or not, we may pay a price for that eventually, sooner or later. But I think these liminal places exist as part of the universe. It's just an unknown part of the universe that we don't know about in many aspects. Although we may see some effects of it, we may not know. We don't know the whole story. It's like seeing the cover of a book, but never reading the book itself. We may see the cover, but we don't know what's behind the cover. And I think a lot of times, I think these liminal places are connected to liminal forces, not just places, but also they can be beings, they can be situations, and not just places. This is what I'm saying, not physical places or in physical places, whatever situation. I think they can be other things as well. We've all heard stories of liminal beings, something that appeared that really shouldn't have been there, and we can't classify it. It's not a known monster, or it's not a known cryptid. We can't classify what, like that X I told you about, that cryptid X. What the heck is that?
Yeah.
It's unclassified. So there may be liminal things as well as places to go along with these liminal places. You see what I'm saying? They may be things that exist in the liminal aspects of the universe. That's mind blowing when you think about it, because that opens up a whole nother new can of worms there, folks.
There's like almost perhaps to be like a world inside our world, right? A world of, and I don't want to throw out science fiction, but almost like a different, well, again, yeah, it'd be like a different existence inside of our own existence here on the planet.
Absolutely. And I think if these places are real, and I think we've seen the outcome of some of these places enough to know that they are there somehow or another, however we may explain them. And as I said, they may be beings, they may be situations, they may be liminal situations that you can get in close to these portals, or close to these places where time and space are thin or twisted or bent or broken, whatever the case may be. When you get close to these areas and you get close to these situations, you'll know it. I've had a lot of people tell me over the years, they felt it, like I told you, I told you about with my story. I feel it, and it is not only in your stomach or in your mind, but it's, in your body. I think your hackles rise, or we used to call them the hairs on the back of your neck, and kind of a thing. And a lot of times I think that's where we get that watched feeling from. You have that feeling that you're being watched. There's nothing there, but there's some, it's like this. I've had a lot of people over the years, and I've had a lot of paranormal investigations where people have said, there's something here. I know it's here, it's watching me, but I can't see it. And I think that's what's so off-putting about these liminal places and beings and situations. It's there, you just can't see it, and that's what makes it very spiritual in a way. It's kind of very spiritual, like it's very much like what we've always said about God. God is a spirit. You can't see him, But the wind, you can't see the wind, but you can see it can blow houses over. Okay, you can see its force. You can see that it does exist. So we know the wind is there, without a doubt, although we can't see it. And so are these liminal places. They are there. We've had evidence that they're there. We just can't see them when we want to see them. But sometimes we may enter into a situation where we do. And I think a lot of times, Rob, that's what happens when these people say, well, you know, I saw something right out of the corner of my eye. It's always out of the corner of the eye. It's something moving off the peripheral vision there, side of it. And that may be where you're catching a glimpse. It's like I said in my book, The Road Unseen. These things are wearing a mask. We can't see what's really behind all this. But once in a while, I think that mask slips. And we catch a glimpse, you know. And it could be reptilian in nature. It could be the liminal places. It can be a lot of different things in the paranormal aspect, okay? Because the paranormal and the supernatural is a big umbrella that goes over all this stuff, folks. It's all connected in that way. But I think once in a while that mask slips. But it's not what's wearing the mask. It's what's behind the mask that we should be very interested in.
Just like when you're out there, then maybe some of the things that people are experiencing is what they think they are. It's something hiding behind the mask, maybe wanting you to perceive it as one thing that it's not. For whatever the reason would be, I don't know. But I think a lot of these things, let's say that you're an avid Bigfoot researcher and you're intent on finding Bigfoot or finding evidence, whatever the case may be, and you're out in the forest, I think a lot of these beings can read your mind or know your energy, right? Know what you're presenting. And for whatever the reason, Dennis, they may just try to trick you into thinking there's something else. Now, what their end motive is, I don't know. You think that goes on more times than often?
I'll tell you what, we have to be very careful. Again, I have to caution everybody. I had a mimic one time call to me in my own voice, call my name from out in the woods. It shouldn't have been there, okay? And I didn't want, it wanted me to come out there. It wanted me to follow, which I'm not, I wasn't that stupid, okay? I wasn't going to follow. I spoke to the thing. I said, I know what you're up to. Go away. And it did. It went away. But a lot of these things, it's like they say in the Mothman prophecies, that movie, the Mothman prophecies.
Right.
You know, these things are playing around with. They're playing a cat and mouse game like with us a lot of times. We're the mouse, okay? We're not the cat, we're the mouse. And they're playing this game with us for whatever jollies they get out of it. I don't know. Whatever these forces are, they're very trickster-like in their abilities to do these things. But yet there's a very malicious feeling beneath that trickery. You know what I'm saying? There's a very malicious, dark, evil is the only word I can think of that goes in behind a lot of this stuff. And they're not doing it for your good. They're not doing it for your benefit. They're not your fairy godmother here to help you out, Cinderella. Okay? They are out to do some bad stuff to you and to screw your life up. And I've seen a lot of lives destroyed by these things, Rob. I mean, destroyed. People live in 6 foot under right now, put there by these things. I've seen a lot of that that's happened over the years. And I don't like to see these things win the battle, you know. I don't like to see them win out over people because there is a very malicious, evil, and dark agenda that they have for us. And we're foolish not to recognize that. We need to be very aware that these things are not out there for fun and profit. Not for us, anyway.
Yeah, I just think that everybody, if you're into this, you've got to really, I mean, you know, there's more to it than just going out in the woods, right, Dennis? I mean, there's more to it than just reading something and trying to investigate the paranormal. investigate cryptids, because you could be opening these doors by chance, right? That your intentions are not to do so, but if you fall into the wrong realm, if you will, you could be asking for trouble and not know about it. Just like I was telling you the story that for years, I brought home all these artifacts I collected with the wife back when I was married. As it turned out, I brought shadow people into the house. That's a long story. I'm not getting into it.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the people have heard it. Then I had to get rid of the stuff.
You know what? I did the same thing, Rob. I brought a lot of artifacts home too. I stopped doing that because that's not a good, smart thing. Definitely, you can bring some of these influences back with you if you're not careful. That's why you need to really protect. I mean, ever before I set foot in the woods or in a house or wherever the situation is, I pray. I try to get myself in that right mood and right mindset and faith-wise, so that these things will be like water off a duck's back with you. They won't follow you back. They won't attach to you. They won't harm you in any way. It's very important that you safeguard yourself doing that every time, not just one day and out of a week. Every time you go, you need to protect yourself, get yourself in a spiritual attitude that you can handle this. And it puts a bumper around you. But let me tell everybody listening tonight, faith over fear. Don't fear. Don't be fearful of things. These things want to play that game with you. They want you to be fearful. They use fear as a weapon against you. Don't give your enemy ammunition. That's the one thing we used to say when I was a policeman. Okay, it's one thing for somebody to shoot at you. That's bad enough. But it's even worse when you gave them the bullets. Don't give them any bullets. Okay, don't let them have that over you. Don't give in to the fear. Don't let them intimidate you and use that fear as a weapon against you. But be smart, though, and safeguard yourself. Be cautious. But, don't live in fear. That's the main thing. Don't let them get that over on you, because they smell that fear. I don't care. I have seen animals do that, Rob. I've seen off-road horses, and they could smell if you were afraid of them, and they would take advantage of that. Animals know that. Animals know. I guarantee you, Bigfoot dog man, whatever you're going to look for out there, knows what your intentions are before you set foot in that forest. That's just how they are. I think that's how they operate. They're super, super sensitive. They're not dumb. They're not stupid.
Right.
You can't write them off as being, we're so much smarter than they are. I don't believe that. Okay. And we've got to understand that's what we're dealing with, especially when it comes to cryptids, liminal places, whatever the situation. We need to be cautious, but don't let fear override that caution.
I think that's the first thing. If you have fear, it can be sensed by these, whatever we're talking about, whatever this phenomenon is. If you're scared, if you have fear, then you're playing right into their hands. Just like a person, can conjure up and they can open themselves with the uses of substances, right? Because your mind is open to these things. You're more, you're more exposed, right? That's kind of the same thing. And if you have fear feeds on fear.
And you know something, Robin? I know you're the same way. When we start to set foot in the woods of the forest, we're different people than what we are when we're outside.
Yeah.
Everything, your senses take over. Instinct begins to work. That's just the way we are as human beings, okay? We're not the same people walking around the woods that we are on the sidewalk most of the time, because we're in a different thing going on here, okay? That's the way we should be. And we got to understand we need to be that way whenever we get around any kind of paranormal activity as well. We need to heighten our sensitivity and be ready for whatever may come. That's the one thing I always used to say about the paranormal, supernatural, cryptid, or whatever situation. You can always expect the unexpected. And that's what you got to look for. So you got to be careful, but don't, like you saying, with the fear, don't fuel them. That fear fuels them. It gives them fuel to work it against you. See, that's the main thing. But we are different when we step out in the woods than what we are on the city sidewalk at Walmart or wherever the situation is. Your senses get heightened. I don't know about you. I'm very much more aware when I'm in the forest, because who knows what you're going to come around that next tree, you know?
Your head has to be on a swivel at all times, and much more so than if you're at the Walmart, right? I mean, when you're out in the woods, you don't know what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you don't. Especially the more I've learned over the years, I never would have thought any of these things going out hiking. I never would have thought to look up, look down, inspect trees, or just be aware of the surroundings. Because half the time I was with somebody that was taking me down the path of a trail that we hiked forever, right? And you don't think about these things. And just like my brother, 20 years hunter, okay, knows about my Bigfoot experience. And he, in the woods, he knows, he heard my story, watches the show, and he told me this, that he never really looked around for evidence of Bigfoot because it wasn't an interest, didn't really believe in it until I, back in 2018, told him what I came across, started looking into this stuff. So he now has his head looking around. I mean, he'll look for certain things from what I've told him to look for and just be more aware. Then he came across something in the woods that he just can't make heads or tails of. In fact, he had called me as soon as he had an available line, a tower, or get a signal on his phone. He goes, Rob, the craziest thing. He lines up a deer. He shoots a deer, and he's tracking this deer about 100, 200 yards, blood trail. Comes into this open meadow, a big tree right in the middle of this meadow. Nothing else surrounding it. Now, you got to remember, too, there's nothing around. There's no other hunters around. There's no four-wheelers. There's nothing. Silence in the woods. He's the only person out there. With my nephew. He's with him. And all of a sudden, this blood trail kind of trickles up to the base of this tree, but it kind of stops. And he looks past the tree and doesn't see any more spatter, doesn't see the deer. Then he goes maybe 3 or 4 foot past the tree, and he looks, and there's some blood, and he's seeing the outline, the shadow of what he apparently was the deer that fell dead there, laying. He looks around, though, Dennis, there's no deer. Nobody. He goes, it wasn't a human being that drug it out. There was no markings. There was nobody around. And he was dead on this deer, tracking it. He knows. He's been doing this a long time. So he goes back to this tree, Dennis, and he looks up this tree, and he sees his blood spatter. Like it was drug up about 5, 6, 7, 8 feet up the tree. Right before it gets to the branches limbing out, extending from the tree, the blood stops right at that base, right at that point. It's gone. There's nothing. There's no deer up in the tree. There's no cougar around there, right in this part of town or country. Nothing. So when he gets back, he gets an open telephone line to get a hold of me. He tells me this story. He asked me, man, was that like a Bigfoot? What was that? I had no explanation for him. Perhaps, I don't know. I never personally heard of Bigfoot doing that. I've heard of cougars doing that, but we don't have, or mountain lions, but they're not around here, right? So that was kind of odd. I'm not going to say it was a cryptid. I don't know what that was. But I guess the moral of the story was he never would have thought to call me or even told me about that had his mind not been thinking about there's other things in the forest. And I happen to think he came across something. Dennis, I don't know what. I can't put my finger on it. But it definitely wasn't a human. Human being did nothing like that. Human being didn't take the deer. Where's the deer? It just drug up the tree, it apparently looked like.
Well, it's very much like an old ranger once told me. He said, when you see the mountain lion, it's probably too late by then.
Yeah.
And when you see something like that, you got to say, hey, maybe I need to, go on to another neighborhood. Okay. Because something that does that, and usually mountain lions do not pull dead deer up in the tree. And bear don't do it. They usually bury their.
Yeah. What's the animal that's they might store a carcass or their kill up in a tree? What would that be? It's one of the animals does that.
The only other animal I know that could pull prey up into a tree would be something like a man. I mean, men do that.
Well, there you go.
If you put it this way, they used to do this if they killed a deer out in the woods and they had to go on and hunt some more. They would pull that deer and a rope up in the tree to keep animals away from
Yes.
them. That's the only other
so
thing I know. Yeah.
Don't know, but I thought that was there was an interesting find on his part, whatever it was. I don't know. It's always been a fascinating show with you. Learning some more things today. Hopefully everybody out there liked it. It looks like they did. Quite a few people showed up tonight. Dennis, what else we got going on? Tell us about your channel, what times you're on.
Well, I have 3 shows a week. Monday nights with my good friend Gerald Fountain. We do the road less traveled. We kind of do the offbeat stuff on that. And then Wednesday night, I have Hunting the Shadows, my main thing. As a matter of fact, this going to be the 100th episode this Wednesday. And we're going to be talking about the one witch that other witches fear, the Raven Mocker.
Oh,
that's going to be great. Yeah. And then Friday night, we have Paranormal Point of View, and all these shows are at 9:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Yep. Excellent. And of course, we can find your books on Amazon, Dennis. What do we do? Just type Dennis Carroll on the Amazon browser?
Yeah, that's Dennis W. Carroll, the author. You can find it on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. I also have a paranormal consultation service. It's free. If anybody needs to contact me about any problems, just want to share the story with me, whatever the situation, you can contact me at denniswcarroll.com. I have a Patreon and membership also at the Hunting the Shadows YouTube podcast channel.
Awesome. All the links will be provided also in the description of this show. If you're new here, please subscribe to Bigfootmichiganrob on YouTube. Go check out Dennis Carroll, Hunting the Shadows, the Blondes and Booze, Texas Front Porch. Yes, that'd be great. Tonight is Tuesday. I'll be back Thursday afternoon with Tex, and then the Blondes on Thursday. KRISTA wasn't here today, everybody. She had no internet. She's got power, but no internet. So I told her go to bed. How about that? Go to sleep. She works a lot of hours. But this is a great show. Everybody hit the like button on your way out. Leave a comment. Dennis, I always love it when you come on the show. You're a wealth of knowledge. Always learn something new every time I talk to you, either on a show or personally. We've become pretty good friends over the last several years. I appreciate that and your wealth of knowledge. So until next time, for Dennis Carroll, I'm BMR. We will see you here, well, heck, in a couple of days. Have a good night, everybody.
It's always a pleasure to see you.
Thanks, Dennis.
Enjoy.
This is the future. Evolution.
The Crossing Realms Conference launches September 19th and 20th and will dock in Richmond, Missouri. This is already being called the event of the year, folks. With an unprecedented list of speakers and special guests, 2 days of cryptids, UFOs, and paranormal presentations, along with a celebrity-filled ghost hunt, meet and greet, gallery reading, vendors, and a film screening. This promises to be both educational and fun. Go to eventbrite.com to secure your tickets and vendor slots before they are all abducted. They're going fast.